October 2025. A fragile ceasefire is brokered, hostages begin to be released, and Benjamin Netanyahu pledges that Israel is committed to peace. But just beneath the surface, the drums of conflict still beat loudly, airstrikes resume, far-right ministers push back, and critics decry the lack of a roadmap. In this video, we ask, can peace truly be achieved now? Let's dig into Netanyahu's latest moves, the obstacles in the way, and whether the current moment holds promise or peril. The world is watching, holding its breath. We've seen a year of unprecedented conflict, followed by a fragile ceasefire brokered after intense international pressure. But as soon as the ink dried, the contradictions began to surface. While Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu speaks of peace to global audiences, his government resumes targeted airstrikes on what it calls Hamas remnants in Khan Yunis and Raif. His commitment to the complete disarmament of Hamas remains a non-negotiable precondition, a stance that appears fundamentally at odds with the current realities on the ground. Simultaneously, his administration has announced the expansion of a security buffer zone along the Gaza border, a move Palestinians and international observers have condemned as a de facto annexation of land. These actions aren't happening in a vacuum. Internally, Netanyahu is navigating a political minefield. His far-right coalition partners, figures like Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel, have threatened to collapse the government if he makes what they see as too many concessions. The Israeli public, deeply traumatized and demanding security, is divided on whether this ceasefire represents a strategic victory or a dangerous gamble. On-screen maps show the immense destruction in Gaza, with casualty figures from the past year highlighting the human cost. A timeline tracks the escalation from the initial conflict to the recent ceasefire and the immediate result of limited military actions, illustrating the push-and-pull dynamic of the current moment. To understand Netanyahu's current strategy, we must look at the immense pressures shaping his decisions. Domestically, his political survival is paramount. After facing widespread criticism for the security failures that preceded the war, he is fighting to rebuild his image as Mr. Security. Any perceived weakness could spell the end of his long political career, especially with potential elections looming on the horizon. His coalition is his lifeline, but it's also a straitjacket, pulling him towards a hardline stance that satisfies his nationalist base but alienates international partners. His strategic goals are clear, at least in his rhetoric: the complete elimination of Hamas's military and governing capabilities, the demilitarization of the entire Gaza Strip, and the establishment of a long-term security arrangement where Israel maintains indefinite control over the region's security. Yet, these ambitions clash fiercely with the constraints he faces. The international community, including key allies like the United States, is demanding a clear path toward a two-state solution and is losing patience with the escalating humanitarian crisis. The sheer logistical challenge of rebuilding Gaza and governing its millions of displaced, desperate people is a task Israel is unwilling and likely unable to undertake alone. His recent declarations about being committed to peace are broadcast to the world, but on the ground, his military's actions and his government's policies tell a very different story, creating a deep chasm between words and deeds that fuels profound skepticism. The path to any lasting peace is littered with formidable obstacles, each one a potential deal. At the forefront is the question of Hamas. Even after a year of devastating war, the group retains significant influence and a presence within Palestinian society. Their willingness to disarm completely is highly doubtful, as their identity is intrinsically linked to armed resistance. Furthermore, the internal Palestinian political landscape is fractured. The divide between Hamas in Gaza and the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank has only deepened, leaving Palestinians without a unified leadership capable of negotiating a comprehensive peace agreement on their behalf. From Israel's perspective, security is the ultimate red line. After the trauma of the past year, the demand for guarantees that such an attack can never happen again is absolute. This translates into non-negotiable demands for demilitarization and security control, terms that are seen as a violation of sovereignty by Palestinians. The situation is further complicated by a web of external actors. Iran continues to fund and support its proxies, including Hezbollah in Lebanon, which remains a potent threat on Israel's northern border. Regional powers like Egypt, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia are all maneuvering to protect their own interests, creating a complex diplomatic chess game. On top of all this, the humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza demands immediate and massive reconstruction efforts. But who will pay for it? And under whose authority will it be managed? The very concepts of justice and accountability loom large, with the International Criminal Court's investigation into alleged war crimes casting a long shadow over both Israeli and Hamas leaders, making good faith negotiations nearly impossible when key figures fear prosecution. So, where do we go from here? We can explore a few potential scenarios, each with profound implications for the future. In the most optimistic scenario, the current ceasefire holds and evolves. Incremental agreements brokered by a consortium of international powers could lead to a phased disarmament of militant groups in exchange for the lifting of the blockade and significant reconstruction aid. Third-party guarantors, perhaps a multinational Arab force, could be deployed to maintain security in a demilitarized Gaza, paving the way for the return of a revitalized and reformed Palestinian Authority. This path would require immense political will from all sides, a unified Palestinian leadership, and sustained forceful pressure from the international community. On the other end of the spectrum lies the pessimistic scenario. The ceasefire collapses entirely. The resumption of full-scale conflict leads to even greater devastation, further radicalizing populations on both sides and making any future peace talks impossible for a generation. The conflict could easily escalate, drawing in Hezbollah and other regional actors, sparking a wider war with catastrophic consequences. A more likely path may be a messy middle ground. We could see a series of fragile, short-term ceasefires, punctuated by periods of low-intensity conflict, a state of mowing the lawn that becomes a grim, permanent reality. Gaza might be governed by a patchwork of local clans and international bodies, with Israel maintaining a tight security perimeter, but with no overarching political solution. For any positive outcome to materialize, a fundamental shift is necessary. Netanyahu or a successor would need to embrace a genuine political horizon. For Palestinians, external powers would have to move beyond rhetoric to exert real leverage, and Palestinians would need to achieve a degree of internal unity not seen in decades. This is not the first time the region has stood at such a crossroads. We can look to the past for lessons, both cautionary and hopeful. The Oslo Accords in the 1990s, for instance, represented a landmark moment of mutual recognition, but ultimately failed due to a lack of implementation. Continued settlement expansion and waves of violence that eroded trust on both sides. The Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty of 1979, however, stands as a durable success, proving that a land for peace formula can work when leaders are willing to take bold risks and are backed by strong U.S. guarantees. That agreement, however, was between two formal state armies. The current conflict involves a state actor and a non-state militant group deeply embedded within a civilian population, a far more complex asymmetry. We can also draw parallels from ceasefires in Lebanon, which have held for long periods but have never resolved the underlying threat from Hezbollah, leaving a state of tense, frozen conflict. These case studies show that peace agreements attempted after intense conflict are incredibly fragile. They require not just a cessation of hostilities, but a clear mechanism for disarmament, robust security guarantees for all sides, massive investment in reconstruction and economic hope, and most importantly, a political process that addresses the core grievances of the conflict. Without these elements, a ceasefire is merely a pause, not a resolution. So, is peace possible now? Looking at the current landscape, it feels premature to be optimistic. The gap between Netanyahu's public statements and his government's actions is vast. The internal political pressures in Israel are pushing against compromise, and the Palestinian leadership remains too fractured to be a credible partner for peace. The fundamental obstacles, Hamas's role, Israel's security demands, and the deep-seated mistrust have not been resolved. They've only been entrenched by another cycle of bloodshed. For now, a lasting peace seems to be a distant prospect. The more immediate reality is likely to be a prolonged period of tense stabilization, managed conflict, and intense diplomatic maneuvering. The key indicators to watch will be telling: will Netanyahu's government survive the internal pressures, or will a new coalition emerge with a different mandate? Can external mediators, like the US and key Arab states, successfully pressure both sides toward de-escalation and tangible political steps? And critically, will a unified and legitimate Palestinian leadership emerge from the ruins of this conflict? The answers to these questions will determine whether this ceasefire is the beginning of a new chapter or just another tragic footnote in a century-long conflict. We want to hear your perspectives in the comments below. And for what to watch next, keep keep a close eye on the upcoming United Nations General Assembly, where a new resolution on Palestinian statehood is expected to be debated, and the potential for Israeli elections in the spring, which could dramatically reshape the political landscape.